Hello everyone, Ace here, and today let's talk a little bit more about Fat Otaku, who has started to become more active on YouTube, with more videos getting uploaded recently, and more importantly with regards to this discussion, has uploaded a video where he has accidentally explained how he is legitimately a fascist, which is to say that he believes in everything within the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state. The video in question is simply titled Generation Zoomerwaffen, and discusses the friend-enemy distinction concept pushed heavily by the works of Carl Schmitt, as well as how this understanding is applied in fascist thinking and what distinguishes the fascist in this utilization compared to, say, for example, a liberal. And what is that thing that separates the two, you ask? Well, it's the idea that the liberal, in extreme circumstances, may temporarily abandon principles out of sheer necessity, and then return to them when it's convenient, while a fascist has no principles at all, except Dev himself has openly admitted that's not actually true. The issue here is that fascists don't care about individual rights or individualist principles because they are fundamentally collectivist, but they do technically, for what it's worth, have their own principles at the end of the day. Not exactly good principles, but they do technically have them. Still, to summarize Dev's distinction between the liberal and the fascist with regards to their ability to abandon principles, Dev argues that the liberals do it out of necessity, while the fascist does it on a whim because he doesn't actually hold those particular principles. There are a couple of times that Dev makes that clear throughout the video, but I believe this is the best clip of the bunch and provides a good overall summary.
When a person like Pinesap cites the friend-enemy distinction as his philosophy, that he intends to simply do what's good for him and oppress his enemies, independent of any sort of standard of conduct, and then turns around and cries that he lost his job. Oh, it's cancel culture, guys. It's political persecution. That's actually really fucking funny, because he's right, it is. But is that not what you wanted to do, dude? You said the rules of the game are that there are no rules, and now you cry that your opponents beat you in that ruleless game? All I have to say to that is, good, fuck you. You wanted this, and now you have it. And every single person like this, who calls for a ruleless game, must continue to lose over and over and over again, until they recognize why advocating for a ruleless game is fucking bad. He is quite literally doing the thing that he accuses the libs of doing. He's doing the when I'm weaker than you I ask you for freedom thing. And now that he's getting punished by his own rule set, he's crying. It's fucking amazing. I'm here for it. Here's the actual big difference between liberals and fascists, or other types of authoritarians, beyond stuff like geography or ethnicity, or the specific policies of any one state. In terms of these two worldviews, here's where they diverge. The liberal does actually hold his liberal principles as a good thing. He may violate them at times due to extreme necessity, like a war or a pandemic. He also may suffer from corruption at times, in his government or his institutions. But as a normal matter of course, the liberal sticks to those principles as best that he can. Meanwhile, the fascist violates all principles as a normal matter of course, and he simply does what is good for his political faction at all times. And because the fascist observes the liberal occasionally violate his principles out of need, the fascist believes the liberal's claim to having principles at all is just a diversion, a subterfuge, because that is what that claim is for the fascist. And by the way, we saw this play out in real time recently. When COVID lockdowns hit, liberal principles were violated by liberal governments, and detractors of those policies called the government fascist for doing what a fascist would do, restricting social gatherings, spying on dissidents, demanding documentation allowing people to work or travel.
Can you all go home, please? It's not a holiday, it's a lockdown, which means you don't just come in and sunbathe. Can you please just leave?
However, unlike a fascist government, when the crisis passed, the liberals gave those emergency powers up. There were some more authoritarian types in various governments who did try to extend those emergency powers beyond their reasonable use. Fair enough. As I said, there's always some corruption. But by and large, when COVID ended, lockdowns and restrictions went away. Because liberals actually aren't fascists. They do actually value people's personal liberties. What liberals reluctantly do during times of extreme need, fascists happily do as a matter of course. And the main reason American rightoids still keep screaming and crying about lockdowns several years on is because they use the memory of those lockdowns to justify their own massive overreaches when it comes to them seizing power.
So now that we've seen what Dev is arguing here, let's talk about how this is Dev admitting accidentally that he is a fascist himself. Well, the simple answer is that when Dev is describing fascists as being unprincipled and applying the standards of a rule for thee and not for me, and engaging in pure tribalism, that is describing Dev to a T. Let's not forget, it was Dev who decided to argue recently that lies are not protected under the confines of free speech, and therefore you should not have the right to lie, while he himself constantly lies. Let's also not forget it was Dev himself who decided to defend literally anything and everything the far left have done, no matter how extreme, on the grounds that at least they're not the right, because the Eastman memo exists. Which, for the record, for all of Dev's complaints about the right milking the lockdowns years later, it is yet another example of his blatant hypocrisy and tribalism that he still continues to bring up the Eastman memo. Speaking of the Eastman memo, let's not forget Dev was also the exact same individual who openly admitted that Biden did the exact same thing that he accuses Trump of doing, and in a way that happens to completely vindicate the Eastman memo, even under the most uncharitable interpretation that Dev took of it. And yet, despite this admission that Dev has made in the past, he still can't bring himself to hold Biden to the exact same standard that he tries to hold Trump to. Let's also not forget that Dev was the person that claimed to be the owner of a free speech YouTube channel and would entertain all ideas there, who then literally seconds later banned yours truly from that channel for having an alternative opinion.
But yeah, basically, like, there's definitely a segment in every community that wants a safe space. And I don't mind putting that safe space up in, like, a private Discord or something, but it's not going to be the channel itself. It's not going to be the videos. It's not going to be the streams. We will entertain all ideas here, and that's how it is.
A few moments later.
Oh, a guy who I banned gave me $10. Thanks for the free $10, buddy, but I'm banning you here too.
Finally, for Dev's critique of fascism being unprincipled, and that this is the big distinction between the unprincipled fascist and the ever-principled liberal, let's not forget that Dev has in the past himself, during his video on Bayes' theorem, had to defend the very nature of being unprincipled as somehow liberal.
Point is, the Bayesian method means updating your priors as new evidence comes out. It does not mean ideologically and irrationally devoting yourself to your initial opinion, even if it turns out in hindsight that initial opinion ends up being accurate. Adhering to the Bayesian method means following the evidence, even if you don't like where it leads. Even if it eventually leads you back to where you started, that doesn't matter. To a non-Bayesian, Bayesian thinking looks from the outside like a person is a flip-flopper, or a fence-sitter, or is unprincipled. But frankly, those terms are just negative reframings of positive attributes. A flip-flopper is a person who changes his position to an opposing one, but if new evidence leads in that direction, that is exactly what you should do. A fence-sitter is somebody who maintains neutrality or non-commitment on an issue, but in the absence of evidence, that's also exactly what you should do. Having principles is often a good thing, but devotion to a principle in the face of contradicting evidence, where the truth may lie somewhere else, that is simply being ideologically captured. After all, an ideology can be described as a set of principles. I'm not blind, by the way. I know there's this persistent criticism floating around right now that I've changed. Most people who say this are former viewers or hate watchers, occasionally a fellow YouTuber who wants to take me down. They all say roughly the same things, that they thought I was based and red-pilled when I was criticizing socialists and progressives. And to be clear, I still have no real love for those groups. My critiques of them still mostly hold true. But now that I'm criticizing Trump supporters, or reactionaries, or monarchists, or libertarians, I've betrayed my former positions. But this is just incorrect. I've said many times over the years, I'm a liberal. That wasn't a dog whistle. I meant it when I said it.
Yes, he tried to argue that it was, in fact, virtuous to be unprincipled, because otherwise you would become a tribalist, even though Dev has become a tribalist because he has been unprincipled, and has chosen to admit facts that he will later dismiss outright, without providing any evidence on why they should be dismissed the moment he realizes they clash with his principles. Yeah, Dev doesn't actually follow Bayes' theorem, no matter how much he wants to pretend he does. In fact, if anything, I do a far better job of following Bayes' theorem simply through providing the sheer amount of evidence, time and time again, increasingly showing Dev to just simply be dishonest, as well as a blatant fascist. Now, there is one final thing I think should be brought up, because I do see a number of people suggesting that Dev is not actually a fascist because he does not embrace nationalism. Except that's not actually true. He does, in fact, embrace nationalism. There are a couple of old videos that he has made on this particular topic, but I believe the most relevant one is this video, where he discusses the matter of civic nationalism, and how that is a core component of liberalism in his eyes.
This is where we get the liberal answer to nationalism. Civic nationalism. It's the idea that a nation is not based on a race, or an ethnicity, or a language, or a historic location, but rather on the shared liberal values, principles, and a willingness to uphold those political institutions. This idea is, in my opinion, one of the greatest French contributions to the liberal tradition.
Now, for what it's worth, being a nationalist itself is not what makes a person a fascist. At the very most, it is a component, but the most important ingredient, if there was one, would be believing into the notion that the state is God. And this, dear viewer, is exemplified in practice typically through an extreme level of statism, which Dev does absolutely exhibit. To the tune that, remember, he recently argued that we need a ministry of truth. In the name of liberalism, of course. Because if lies are not protected under the confines of free speech, well, that means that it is the job of the government under those circumstances to determine what is the truth and what is not the truth. And so such a position can only result in a ministry of truth in the end.